What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Fringe. Big problems for Pierre Poilievre running in his new riding, as what we saw during the last federal election could be coming to derail, or at least interfere, in Pierre's attempts to maintain his leadership, I guess, of the Conservative Party, going back into the House of Commons. Now, we have to remember, the candidate who gave up his seat for Pierre Poilievre was 6 months away from getting his pension. He jumped on a grenade to allow Pierre to maintain his leadership. And we now have an outside group trying to interfere in that election, in that, I guess you could call it a by-election, and many others, in order to try and derail the whole reason that this is being done in the first place. I'm going to get into that. Before I do, I just want to remind you guys, we're right on the cusp of 100,000 subscribers, like less than 3,000. Guys, I almost sound like walking there. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Turn on your bell for all notifications so you don't miss a single beat from this channel. I got a lot to talk about today, a lot to talk about coming up with Danielle Smith. You guys don't want to miss a beat. All notifications will make sure you don't miss anything, or our live streams on Fridays, by the way. I'll get into that later. First, let's get into the news here. Wrong button. The Clown Broadcasting Corporation, or the CBC, put out an article back in April, the beginning of April. I know it was only a month ago, talking about the longest ballot protest. This was organized by a couple of brothers who wanted to derail Pierre's riding in Carleton. Here's the problem with it, because I have to cite this article before we get into the real article. Pierre Poilievre would be facing more opponents than ever in his 8th federal campaign, thanks to dozens of protest candidates running along in his riding. Nearly 80 candidates registered to run an Ottawa area riding of Carleton, where Pierre has been the MP since 2004. We all know how that turned out. Now, it says here that most of those candidates are linked to an electoral reform advocacy group called the Longest Ballot Committee. So they're all in on it. Again, you only need so many signatures in order to qualify to run. So they all sign each other's papers. They've got their groups that it's almost an instant guarantee that they're on that ballot. And that's exactly what happened in Carleton. I want to point out that before I point out shenanigans in any election here, I definitely will state publicly, I do not take any funds from overseas groups that mean to infiltrate channels. I think it's important to say that before I'm branded for doing so. It says here, the group wants to put a citizens' assembly in charge of electoral reform, says the political parties are too reluctant to make government more representative of the electorate. Well, this channel took a lot of heat during the Liberal leadership race because, just like the pleb, I stood out and said, hey, let's vote for Chandra Era. Let's vote for Ruby Dalla. Let's vote for somebody that doesn't allow Mark Carney to run. And the reason I pushed that was for one of two reasons. It would either show exactly what happened is that the Liberals are so corrupt, they will eliminate anybody who gets steam in order to install Mark Carney, or else Mark Carney would leave and we would have somebody reasonable, we'll say, making it simpler for Pierre to run against them on his policies, somebody who wasn't going to steal his platform. But that was branded for electoral interference. I don't know what groups are going to call this. Here's their quote. Our point is that having politicians in charge of the election laws is a very straightforward conflict of interest, and they should hand that responsibility over to an independent, nonpartisan body, said Thomas Sheckwitz. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that last name. An organizer with the committee who acts as the Protest Canada's official agent. I love that word being put in. The problem with this is they're saying our point is that having politicians in charge of the election laws is a straightforward conflict of interest. Well, for your group to do it, how is that not a conflict of interest? How is that not derailing campaigns? How is that not interference? So what's funny about this was it says here the group said they also intended to sign up dozens of candidates in Liberal leader Mark Carney's neighboring Nepean riding. But he said the group didn't have enough time to organize, shucks, because Carney only announced where he'd be seeking a seat the weekend he triggered the election. We really wanted to do both leaders, he said. Things just didn't add up in favor for that. We're disappointed to have to drop it. Wah, wah. What's funny about it is that we all saw how it turned out. Many people blamed this for costing Pierre his riding. I broke down the actual data from the election as to what I believe cost it. Again, you can go back and check those videos. But now that Pierre has been given a seat to run for in a by-election in Alberta, what's supposed to be a safe seat is now coming out as the longest ballot group now takes aim at the by-election where Pierre plans to run. What are we doing here? What is happening here? The group that added dozens of candidates on the ballot in Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's riding in the recent federal election is planning to do the same in the upcoming by-election. Poilievre is expected to seek a seat in the House of Commons for the Alberta riding of Battle River Crowfoot after losing his long-held seat of Carleton, to the Liberals on April 28th. Damien Curic, who was re-elected in Battle River Crowfoot for the third time last week, has pledged to step aside so Pierre can run there in his place. Now, Curic was, again, 6 months away from his pension. Unlike Jagmeet Singh, he won't hold the country hostage. He's willing to waive his pension, his years of service to the Conservatives, in order for Pierre to run. What a guy. And this is the response. Well, let's rig the ballot. Let's get dozens and dozens of names on there just to screw with Poilievre. Why? Prime Minister Mark Carney said last week he will call the by-election quickly to allow the Conservative leader the chance to return to the House of Commons. The longest ballot committee was responsible for adding 85 of the 91 names on the Carleton ballot, though none of them got more than 57 votes. Well, they weren't trying to get votes. This was all just to distract. It was all to interfere. What's stupid here is that Danielle Smith just amended certain voting irregularities in Alberta. I think this is the next thing that should be done throughout the country, that you shouldn't have more than, like, you should have to have official party status, which would be funny for the NDP now that they don't. But you should have to have official party status, or at least have to pass a certain bar other than just signatures before you can do this, to avoid this from happening. Because whether or not, like, look, people who go for this by-election are either going to vote for Pierre or they're not, and they're going to know before they go in if they're going to vote for Pierre or not. But doing this is just so ridiculous, and it undermines our elections entirely, because a couple of cranky boys want to sit and say, well, I don't like that the government handles it. I don't like that this happens. Like, give me a break. Says the group says it's trying to get attention to push for electoral reform and has run dozens of candidates on the ballot in multiple by-elections in Ontario, Quebec, and Manitoba since 2022. Well, then why isn't somebody shutting them down? And I know that that's what their purpose is, that they're pushing for electoral reform. But this isn't how you do it. I wish Canada would get electoral reform across the board. Alberta needs to have more seats representative in the House of Commons in terms of, other places like Ontario or Prince Edward Island that have more seats than all of Alberta. But this isn't the way to do it. It said it would benefit voters if politicians recused themselves and passed decisions about election rules to a permanent, independent, and nonpartisan body such as a citizens' assembly, the group said in an email. Well, who decides the citizens' assembly? This is just one group saying, well, they shouldn't have it, we should. Says who? Who determines that? Who determines who's qualified for that? And how do you prevent corruption from within there? The email said that if at least 200 people sign up before May 12th, the committee will try to make a long ballot happen. Elections Canada had to begin counting the advanced poll votes in Carleton 6 hours before the polls closed on April 28th, and the full count was not complete until the day after the election. The ballots, which had to be specially printed, measured almost a full meter long and were challenging for voters to fold and stuff into the ballot boxes. And then it mentions that Pierre lost to Bruce Fanjoy by 4,315 votes. Again, I don't think that this longest ballot affected that. It was definitely a distraction. It was definitely interference, but I don't believe that it affected it. Again, if you knew you wanted to vote for Pierre, you were voting anyways. You could find his name on it. People knew to look in the central area of the ballot. Says the loss means he will likely miss the entire spring sitting of the House of Commons, which is set to begin on May 26. Well, again, it's only for a couple of weeks, and then they're going on summer break again. By-election can be called as soon as 11 days after Keurig resigns, which can only happen after he's officially sworn in as MP, and the by-election campaign will run between 36 and 50 days. My guess is the minimum. Keurig, who was first elected in 2019, won in Battle River Crowfoot with more than 82% of the votes in the most recent election. So again, it's a safe battleground for Pierre. Carleton was also adjusted back in 2023 to add Canada, not Canada, Canada, Liberal stronghold, which also has a lot of government workers living in that riding. Pierre's announcement to cut spending, to cut programs, to cut funding to certain government branches, I'm sure it didn't help him. But again, I put the blame on his team. They should have known to move him before the election to a safer riding. Said Pierre visited the riding recently, posting on social media on Monday that he visited Keurig's farm, which he did. I thought that was great. People in these communities feed and power our country, he said. It'll be an honor to work for support, return to Parliament, hold the government to account, and champion common sense values for Canada. So again, I don't like that statement because the slogans didn't win Pierre the election. I know that's me, nitpicking here, but he's got to get off of that. He's got to look at how to rebrand the Conservatives if he wants to win the next election, if we even get to a next election. Don't forget, after Danielle Smith's announcement and address to the country yesterday, because all eyes were on it, not just Alberta's, that should the signatures come through on a referendum ballot, the question of however it's put together, that does Alberta stay or leave, will be presented on that ballot. Now, Alberta Prosperity Project has already reached the pledged amount of signatures. What they have to reach is the 50+% of voters to say we should leave, we should separate. And I know a lot of people are asking, well, what happens to Pierre if he's in that riding? Many are speculating Pierre is taking this Alberta riding because he's going to distract away from any possible idea of separation. I disagree. I think it's a matter that it's just a safe seat for him. But many people are also asking, what happens if Pierre wins that and Alberta decides to leave? First off, the process for Alberta to leave would be lengthy at best if the vote were to go through. Negotiations have to happen. Everything has to look at what happened in Brexit if you want a reference to how long it can take. Pierre could easily be moved from that Alberta riding to another riding, just as he was from Carleton to Battle River Crowfoot. I don't think it's that complex. Again, I could be wrong, but that's just speculation on my part. Let me know what you guys think about this longest ballot. Do you agree with what they're doing? Do you agree with the shenanigans that they're putting forward, that they're just trying to stomp their feet and cry and say that they should have or a nonpartisan outlet should have the decision-making process of our electoral reform? Let me know what you guys think down below. If it's your first time here, again, I hope this video has earned your subscription, as we're so close to that 100,000 mark. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure to join me on this channel this Friday night and every Friday night for Friday Night Fringe, our live streaming weekly show where we go over everything that happened this week in politics, everything that's coming up in the week ahead that we're aware of, joined by the beautiful Mrs. Fringe as we go through your Q&A and comments outside of making these videos. I look forward to chatting with you guys outside of these videos themselves and hearing what you have to say in those live streams, but I most importantly look forward to hearing what you have to say this Friday, starting at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, again, this Friday and every Friday on the channel. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you on the next one.